My cousin Lisa hosted a dinner party for her mother's boyfriend, and she had several people attend that dinner.
Aunt Helen stayed after the party, helping clean up a little bit. And then Helen went home and then didn't hear from Lisa the next day or the next day, and was calling Lisa, and Lisa wasn't returning her calls, which is very unusual.
And then it went on to Monday, and Helen still hadn't heard from her. And then she started becoming a little bit concerned. Then Helen received a phone call from Lisa's work, and they indicated that Lisa hadn't been in work for a couple of days. And Helen became alarmed because that was completely out of character for Lisa. So Aunt Helen drove over to Diamond Heights, and when Aunt Helen arrived at Lisa's condo, there was police tape surrounding the building.
Neighbors had reported a foul odor coming from Lisa Valdez's unit.
The manager noticed that the door was unlocked. He opened up the door and saw a body on the floor, basically right in front of where the door opens. And he quickly closed the door and called 911.
The manager had stumbled into a murder scene.
Lisa's body was on the floor at the foot of the bed. She was in a pretty advanced state of decomposition. There was such a significant amount of blood. It was plainly obvious that a violent struggle had taken place, that she had met a very violent death.
The neighbor reported that at about 1:30 early Sunday morning, they heard a loud thumping sound above, which would have been Lisa's apartment.
We knew that her mother had left around midnight, but the lack of forced entry into her apartment indicated that she had to have opened the door. There was no other explanation.
We could tell that there was no robbery or burglary involved, since her purse and her belongings, money and jewelry and whatnot, were not taken.
But on a closer investigation, detectives make an odd discovery. Part of Lisa's hair has been cut off.
A fixation that her killer must have had with her, taking a souvenir.
The people were terrified because it is a gated community. Someone can't just walk through the neighborhood and gain access to your dwelling. It was impossible.
Detectives believe that Lisa was murdered in the early hours of Sunday, May 17th.
And then on Monday, May 18th at 10 a.m., the housekeeper opened up the door and saw a body on the floor, naked. She heard the voice of a guy, and she thought she was interrupting an intimate moment with Lisa and another person. So she leaves, and then nobody finds Lisa until Wednesday.
The toilet seat in Lisa's bathroom became a focus of my attention because it was left raised. It was inconsistent with a woman living alone.
Inspector Schultes dusts the seat for fingerprints.
All of Lisa's friends and family provided prints, and that allowed me then to compare them to the prints off the toilet seat.
The fingerprints on the seat belonged to someone other than Lisa and her guests. Investigators believe they could belong to the killer.
When the blood droplets on one of Lisa's pillows was examined by the crime lab, they were able to determine first that it was not Lisa's blood and that it was of an unknown male profile.
My mom was the last to see her alive. She told me that Lisa had a date the next afternoon.
We found out that Lisa was dating a person named Albert Cato, and she was going to have a date with him on Sunday, May 17th, 1998. But he canceled the date and said he was out to 3 o'clock in the morning with friends.
Police bring Albert Cato in for an interview. As soon as he arrives, they notice a jagged cut on his hand.
In a violent crime, We know that when someone is being stabbed repeatedly, that very often the person who's doing the stabbing cuts themselves in the act. And so the fact that he had a cut on his hand heightened the suspicion that he may have been involved in this crime.
But on June 5th, they run tests on Cato's fingerprints and on his DNA. Neither matches samples found on the scene. Cato can't be the killer.
Lisa received a couple of calls from unknown callers at the wee hours of Sunday morning, but there were a couple of strange messages left by the 19th caller.
The 19th caller wants to know if Lisa is home on that fateful night.
The weird voice messages were identified as coming from Albert Robinson, who turned out to be a friend of Lisa's, co-worker, and known her for a few years.
A few days later, Lisa's family holds a memorial service in the chapel of her alma mater, Mills College. Also in attendance, none other than Albert Robinson, the man behind the odd-sounding voicemails.
Albert Robinson presented a letter to the attendees that was very bizarre. He talked about his love for Lisa, that they were going to get married and they were going to raise a family. A very, very completely different take on their relationship than what Lisa shared with her friends and family.
Lisa was absolutely not dating Albert. Albert was a person that had always struck me as odd.
When a search warrant was served at his home, detectives found photos of Lisa all over his house.
But once again, the DNA and fingerprints failed to match, eliminating Robinson and dealing another major blow to the investigation.
No information was coming in as to who or why anybody would want to kill Lisa, and they definitely hit a dead end.
10 years after Lisa Valdez's murder, her case remains shelved. But Inspector Schultes always kept it in the back of his mind.
And then on September 2nd, 2011, I got a phone call from the state, the DNA laboratory, the CODIS laboratory. Here's the good news. You got the hit. It's all the markers. Every single peak is matching.
After 10 long years sitting on ice, the case finally heats up.
The DNA was in the database for all these years, and it finally matched to a person named Anthony Quinn Hughes. Ronan called me at 9 o'clock at night, and he said, Anthony Quinn Hughes' right middle finger was on that toilet seat. That was just icing on the cake, because now it's 2 pieces of key evidence.
Detectives review Lisa's answering machine and find that Hughes had left a message after the murder.
It was nondescript and nothing really unusual about it, except for the fact that he made it after she was already dead on May 18th.
Did detectives make a crucial error by overlooking the message from Hughes?
In my view, the detectives at the time blew it by not going far enough through Lisa's information. On her answering machine, they only went up to 19 people and researched them.
And Hughes was the 22nd caller. Investigators also find what appears to be an old contact for Hughes in Lisa's address book.
They contacted me in the middle of the night, and I asked them to bring Hughes to a homicide. When we showed him a picture of Lisa Valdez and asked him, do you recognize this person? Anthony Quinn Hughes said no. And then I asked him, so you don't know Lisa Valdez? And then he did a double take, shook his head, and he said, oh yeah, we dated in high school. And then we hit him with the evidence and particulars of the case.
DNA from you was found in Lisa's apartment from 1998. Okay, you could have been, but you don't remember.
Tell me, what is this all about? Okay.
Anthony, you know what it's all about. You know very well that she's not alive anymore.
No. No.
You can go ahead and cry, you can get emotional, and it's good. It's good.
Did I get something the right way, please?
Absolutely.
And I thought that he was about to write out a confession. He asked for a pen and a pad. He was bent over and he was like ready to write. And instead of writing, he took the pen to his neck and his stomach in front of us and just went into like a little tizzy.
I want to die.
You don't want to die.
I want to die.
You don't want to.
Trying to pin something on me.
No,
I
we're
will
not trying to
die.
pin anything on you.
You know what we have on you.
Anthony,
What was going through my head was, why would he do this if he wasn't guilty? If he did, in fact, not have anything to do with her murder, how is it possible that he would be taking his life now? He wants to die now. It was about 11 o'clock on Saturday morning when I told my partner, Kevin, we still got to find Lisa's mom, Helen Valdez, and we got to tell her in person after all those years of not knowing. It was very, very emotional. And I get emotional thinking about it, just remembering how much it meant to her.
For some reason, Anthony Quinn Hughes decided to murder his old friend, Lisa Valdez. Exactly why remains a mystery.
During the early arraignments, Hughes walked in confident, haughty, arrogant, with attitude, right? And then during the trial, he was a very meek demeanor, hunched over, with a Bible in his hand and wearing a cross around his neck. So that's all, that's all an act.
The jury finds Anthony Quinn Hughes guilty of second-degree murder of Lisa Valdez.